starting at 7.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7.
It's Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's not the political petroleum reserve.
Strategic Petroleum Reserve is more than half full with about 400 million barrels of oil. That's more than enough for any emergency drawdown.
With Election Day now 3 weeks away, a new CBS News poll finds Democratic momentum stalling.
She supports taxpayer-funded abortion on demand for any reason at any time.
Those decisions are made between the woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith.
It's very much about turnout for a lot of these groups. And then you ask yourself, well, if those candidates moderate their stances at all, do some of these folks stay home?
Voter turnout is an issue in every election, and it surely will be in these midterm elections, which are now just 20 days away. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes, coming to you from our Washington bureau. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, with Election Day nearing, we are getting a better understanding of the groups of American voters who could make or break control of Capitol Hill. CBS News has conducted tens of thousands of interviews with voters about their motivations and priorities ahead of the November elections. And we found 4 categories of what you might call election influencers. Here to explain who those influential voters are and which way they're trending are 2 of my CBS News colleagues, Anthony Salvanto, our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, and political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. Welcome to both of you. Okay, Anthony, first up, what is an election influencer and how did you come up with these 4 categories?
Hey there, Nancy. We wanted to take a look at the way voters see this campaign and this election through their eyes, not through ours. And so we've got all this polling data that you mentioned where they've been telling us the way that they are processing all that's going on. And the first one I want to get to right now, because this is such an influential group, are the pressured parents. Because for years during the pandemic, parents told us that they were wrestling with all the rules and requirements and also the stress of keeping their kids healthy. And then, as soon as that started to abate, they got hit with inflation. And these parents and these voting parents told us that they felt like they were pressured by inflation. They're having trouble making ends meet. So in this group, what we find is that not only have they felt stressed dealing with COVID, they're concerned about affording goods and services. And in their vote, the economy is really important. These folks are trending a little bit Republican right now. It's 47-40 Republican, but they're an essential group of these 4 that I really want to watch because on one hand, as I mentioned, they don't like the way the economy is going. On the other hand, they say, well, the Republicans might be more for the wealthy than the middle class. So there's a little bit of conflict there. That makes them a key group to watch, Nancy. I'm going to show you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, tell me about the next group. These are the Trump true believers, the Trump you're calling them.
True believers. Look, you can't understand the election without understanding this group, which is really the center of gravity in the Republican Party right now. These are folks who consider themselves part of the MAGA movement as well as Republicans. So that's as distinct from all Republicans. And one of the hallmarks here is that they see the Democrats more as enemies than just political opposition. They, of course, want the party to be loyal to the former president, hence part of the name. But also, these are folks I think are worth watching. We know they're going to vote Republican if they vote. The Republican Party needs them. You see Republican candidates talking about things like election denialism. They certainly want to hear that. They want to hear that loyalty to the former president, even though those things are net negative for the rest of the electorate. So that helps you understand the rhetoric in this campaign and what Republican candidates are saying and doing. And then the other part, the other one I want to talk about here, and I know Caitlin has a lot of good insights on this as well, is the Restoring Roe Voters, because this is very simply women who are essentially single-issue voters on abortion rights. They tell us a candidate has to agree with them on the measure. They want abortion to be legal. And these are so important because I'm going to watch whether their ranks can grow if the Democrats, get their message across, they want the size of this group to expand. But of course, there's the economy out there that's sort of competing for attention. And that's why this is such a key group, Nancy.
And then the fourth group, Anthony, that you described, you're calling the young and the restless. And I'm guessing these are not people who like to watch soap operas.
Well, maybe not. They certainly are a mystery. And there's certainly a story here in the sense of, will they show up? This group is the least likely age group to show up. These are under 30 voters without kids. We know that they've been pressed by the economy like a lot of folks. We know that they interact with the campaign through social media. They also have them tell us they think older generations had it easier than they do. However, they're 6% of the electorate right now. Only 4 in 10 say they're definitely going to vote. If they do vote, they vote majority Democratic, so the Democrats have a better chance. But right now, if they're staying home, the numbers that we estimate right now, that puts a damper on Democrats' chances. And therefore, that is another reason we want to make this group one of our influencers. They can influence the election by whether or not they decide to vote in the first place, Nancy.
Such an interesting way to look at the electorate. It's not as simple as red versus blue. Some of these groups cross party lines, and the big question is how many people in each of these groups will actually turn out on Election Day. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for breaking it down. And let's bring in now Caitlin Huey-Burns, because you've actually been out on the campaign trail talking to some of the very kinds of voters that Anthony was just describing for us.
Yeah, and I love the way that he has broken these groups down, because you're seeing this on the trail, and kind of putting these labels really gives a good description about how people are feeling. One aspect of this is that single issue abortion voter, and that's been what we've been trying to track this whole election. Has this issue, the Dobbs decision that came down in June, has this really changed the game in terms of how the midterms are shaping up? And you can argue that it has. We've seen over the past couple of weeks, especially in our poll over the weekend, that the fervor around abortion access and that as an issue has dissipated a little bit. But it still is such a big issue that Democrats need to push, because it's making these races competitive. I was recently in Wisconsin, where you have Mandela Barnes, the Democrat, running against Ron Johnson. The really big issue in that race, besides inflation and the economy, is crime. But Mandela Barnes is also pushing the issue of abortion, because in Wisconsin, they're currently under a law going back to 1849, banning nearly all abortions in the state. So he's really doing a lot of events in these closing days focused on the abortion issue and trying to at least keep the Democratic base engaged. Same thing happening in North Carolina. Again, economy, inflation running over everything. But Sherry Beasley, the Democrat there, is at least making it competitive, because North Carolina is a place that has a Democratic governor. And also, I went to an abortion clinic there that's seeing a total influx of patients from out of state, because they're really the only place in the South that doesn't have these restrictions. So you can see an electorate that may be more favorable to abortion access there. So is it going to be the be-all, end-all for Democrats? Probably not. The economy and inflation reigns over everything, and you have all these other issues going on. But they need this issue to turn out their base, and that's why you saw the president pushing for it earlier this week.
Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting to see how Democratic candidates are grappling with this issue, because they know it's been eclipsed in the polls by the economy, by inflation, and yet they have to still try to keep it front and center, or at least they believe they have to, because they need those Restoring Roe voters, as Anthony put it, to turn out on Election Day. They know that those people are motivated. They need to make sure as many of them get to the polls as possible.
Exactly. And Republicans I've talked to, too, say that they have seen the difference that this has made in some of these races. And the main reason is because they argue that Democrats didn't really have much to be excited about when it comes to Biden. He has low favorability ratings. The economy is, not doing well. Inflation is terrible. People are feeling that in nearly every aspect of their lives. You have these pressured parents still reeling from the pandemic. So they argue that the base needed something to come out and vote for. And even if this dissipates as an issue, it still is something that has energized voters in terms of registering them. The key is, can you turn them out?
And then you had House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying in an interview with Punchbowl today that Democrats need to do a better job of talking about inflation. Is that something that you're hearing on the campaign trail as well?
Yes.
That voters don't believe that the Democratic Party has done a good job of talking about that issue?
Yeah, this remains the top issue. When you ask voters what they're concerned about, it's just that things cost a lot. And it's not just gas prices. It's going to the grocery store, everything costs a lot. Going out to lunch, doing any everyday things just costs a lot of money. And even people who are supportive of the Biden administration or supportive of Democrats have said that, look, it kind of sucks, right? I mean, this is something that Democrats have tried to message on. They've tried to point to things like the Inflation Reduction Act that alleviates some of these costs. But a lot of what they've done doesn't address these specific issues, right? And they argue that, look, this is a global phenomenon, especially when it comes to gas prices. But when you're, coming to the end of the day, that, is still, things still cost a lot, right? So that kind of message, they're making clear that they're speaking to that. But as you well know, midterms are about turning out your base of support, too. And so you have to give your base something to kind of get excited about.
Right. And it's hard to make people feel good about inflation. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your insights. The Florida Secretary of State's office is responding to body cam footage showing the arrests of people accused of voting illegally. It released a statement today saying, in part, quote, these individuals lied when they registered to vote. They were never eligible, and there is no confusion on that point. We are confident that when all the facts and evidence are revealed through the legal process, these arrests will be upheld in accordance with the law. A number of those arrested back in August say they believed they had permission to register to vote, even though they were actually not eligible under state law. The 2018 law we're talking about here allows most people convicted of felonies to vote after they've completed their sentences, but certain categories like a felony sex offense or murder are ineligible. The 2024 presidential election begins the day after the midterms are over, if it hasn't started already. I'm going to speak to someone who is considering throwing their hat into the ring next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became a sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When weather turns extreme.
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
Every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
people from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go! CBS mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes. Former Trump press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders is favored over Democrat Chris Jones to become the next governor of Arkansas, replacing term-limited Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor Hutchinson has spoken publicly against President Biden's policies, but he has also spoken out against former President Trump, saying that January 6th should disqualify the former president from any 2024 run. Governor Hutchinson joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us, Governor. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Nancy.
You know, we're seeing some really interesting polling in the last few days, swings in some groups of voters back to Republicans as the economy climbs to the top of their list of concerns. But when it gets down to it, do you really think anyone is still undecided at this point?
It's doubtful. It's been a long campaign. But what you see is that the momentum has shifted, as you indicated, because, one, the candidates are talking about not the last election, but they're talking about inflation and the economy and high energy costs, and that's what's on the people's minds. So I think you see that shift, a little bit of momentum, but there's a lot of unpredictability about this election cycle. I think we're going to learn a lot about it, and I think the candidates had better keep working very hard, because you don't know exactly who's going to show up, what the focus group is going to be able to get out there and have an influence on the election between now and Election Day.
Midterm elections always have the capability to surprise us. Governor, midterm elections are also often viewed as a referendum on the sitting president. And at a forum in Texas a few weeks ago, you were asked about President Biden's intellectual capacity. I want to put up what you said because it was really interesting. You said, I have been with President Biden on a number of occasions, and he seemed sharp. I think it's an error for anyone to diminish our president in such harsh ways intellectually. It weakens our presidency, so I don't like that. Do you think that some in your party have taken this argument about the president's capacity too far?
Well, whenever you look at our president negotiating with foreign leaders representing the United States of America, you know, there should be an element of support and certainly not undermining in terms of intellectual capacity, as I said. Now, there's plenty of room to disagree with President Biden on policy. I do, and I could articulate those. But when it comes to the president, I just have respect for the office, and I personally would not be engaging in that suspicion about his capacity.
Your fellow Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has been in the news this week after body cam footage was released of Tampa police arresting people for registering to vote illegally. Many of those who were arrested were African Americans. What do you think of this approach in Florida? Do you think it could intimidate minorities from voting? Would you consider doing that in Arkansas?
Well, it's just a matter of enforcing the law. Obviously, in Arkansas, we don't allow convicted felons to vote unless they go through the process to have their eligibility restored. Here, in this case, we don't know the facts. I mean, if it's a violation of the law, we hold people accountable for it. But obviously, the video just gives you a little bit of compassion. Sorry that, you know, this circumstance arose in their life. It looks like, you know, it's a question of fact as to whether it was intentional or not. And so the law has to be enforced. Those officers obviously didn't enjoy doing that, tried to show compassion to them, but we have to let the justice system work. And if they're not guilty of that, I trust that they'll be acquitted.
Right. Many people say that they didn't realize that they weren't eligible to vote. But, you know, is this a use of state resources? It's one of the uses that DeSantis is being criticized for. You've also got his recent transport of migrants from Florida and Texas to parts of the Northeast. What message do you think he's trying to send here? And do you agree with that message?
Well, from a Republican messaging standpoint, first of all, when it comes to voting, we ought to encourage more people to vote, not less. We want people to go to the polls. We want to make it as easy as possible. But at the second part of it is we want integrity at the ballot box. And so we have a voter ID that's been passed in Arkansas. We have requirements to vote, and you have to meet those requirements. And we have to enforce the law if you don't. We don't want voter fraud. And so I'm going to let Governor DeSantis handle Florida on that issue. We work with Arkansas to make sure that we have integrity at the voting booth, but we also want to expand the voting access. We really emphasize early voting access, early voting in Arkansas. It's an easy way to do it, and we've expanded that, and I'm fully supportive of that. Let's just have the right checks to make sure that one person gets one vote.
Governor, you've made it very clear that January 6th was something of a dividing line for you. It's one of the reasons that you think your party should move on from Donald Trump. There are two major gubernatorial candidates right now, Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, Kari Lake in Arizona, who continue to push claims that the election was stolen. What does it mean if one or both of them are victorious with that platform?
Well, I suspect that as governor candidates and as Republicans, they're going to work to govern their state in a conservative way. I don't think that the 2020 election is going to be an issue in their governance. Obviously, I disagree with the admonition or their encouraging the fact that somehow the election might have been stolen, because it wasn't. But they run their race there in Arizona and in Pennsylvania. And I think all of our candidates, though, are moving away from that. Our candidates are looking to the future. They're spending time on inflation and the pocketbook issues that impact the voters. And so I see a shift from what I know in a primary, they campaigned on those. I see a shift from that. That's healthy. We need to talk about issues. We need to talk about ideas for the future and not get sidetracked on the past.
Speaking of ideas for the future, you were among a number of potential 2024 presidential candidates who met with the widow of Sheldon Adelson, the GOP mega donor recently, Miriam Adelson. Should we take that as a sign that you are getting closer to deciding to run in 2024?
Well, it's certainly a sign that I'm concerned about the direction of our country. I want to be a voice for common sense conservative leadership, which is what I believe I offer. I think we ought to be talking about the future in an optimistic way. I don't think we need to be relitigating the past constantly. That's my message. And if that brings me into the national debate next year, then I welcome that. But we are really working hard on helping our candidates this year, and then we'll see what the future holds.
Keeping us guessing once again. Governor Asa Hutchinson, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
We are still awaiting the January 6th committee's subpoena of former President Trump. An update on when that might happen next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Thinking about it Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
I'm thinking about it.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Nancy Cordes. We are still awaiting an official subpoena from the January 6th committee for former President Donald Trump. The committee voted unanimously in favor of one last week during what was likely their last public hearing before the midterms. They're expected to issue the subpoena as early as Thursday. For more on this, CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us from the Capitol complex now. So, Scott, tell us, what's the latest on the timing of this subpoena and what it would require President Trump to do?
The committee members on Friday, the day after that vote on the subpoena, underscored that it would happen in short order, or in their words, promptly. Turns out promptly doesn't mean within 96 hours of the vote, because here we are as Wednesday concludes and no subpoena yet, and no subpoena expected tonight. Multiple sources tell CBS News. All that being said, there's a time crunch no matter when this subpoena goes out. This committee expires. It disappears at the end of the calendar year when this Congress ends. And a subpoena has to have deadlines for the recipient. So if they issue the subpoena, when they issue the subpoena, they have to give Donald Trump time to respond. And all of that is eating into the remaining time, Nancy. And the remaining time for this committee is precious.
So it sounds like you're saying he could essentially run out the clock if he wants to. Has he said anything publicly about whether he would be willing to comply?
Now, the former president has a long, rich history of running out the clock on legal challenges, and though he hasn't directly responded about whether he'd agree to an interview or whether he'd hand over documents to this panel, time is on his side. They have less than 3 months to complete their work, and there's other work this committee has yet to complete. They have to finish that required seminal written report, all of their comprehensive findings. They have likely more interviews to undertake and more documents to procure. An interview with the former president would be just some of what they have to do as the clock ticks loudly.
Right, and they certainly can't be reinstated if Republicans do, in fact, take control of Congress in November, as many expect that they will. On another front, Scott, the former president, also being deposed today in a defamation lawsuit. He was due to be deposed at Mar-a-Lago, his Florida residence. This is a case having to do with allegations made against him by the columnist E. Jean Carroll. Fill us in. What is this all about?
And that deposition was scheduled for today. In previous reports, Carroll's attorneys didn't want to disclose the location or time of the deposition. No need for them to release that information publicly. Though the deposition was expected today, the legal battle in this defamation case likely has many months, if not years, to go. There are appeals in the works. There's a lot to unpack in this defamation accusation and in this defamation case. The deposition, if and when it's completed, is only a step on a very long journey, but it's yet another legal challenge facing the former president as the number of legal challenges quickly grows.
Right. Former president initially accused of rape by E. Jean Carroll. Scott MacFarlane, thank you so much for joining us. And that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue on Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but